Don't you understand? Well, you caught me because we are very much alike. Without our imaginations, we'd be like all those other poor dullards.
I joined the FBI in 1970. I was in graduate school. I was living in a terrible environment, kind of like this terrible environment that we're in right now. And an FBI agent recruited me, and off I went. And I really didn't know much about it, but I was interested in behavioral science. And I was quite surprised that the research that they were doing was from a perspective of rehabilitation, from the perspective of corrections. People making these decisions in this country were actually making decisions having never looked at the crime itself. So what I decided to do was to go into the penitentiaries, generally at nighttime, very, very low lighting, unannounced, and go in there with my badge, and I could get into any penitentiary I wanted to with that FBI credential and catch the bad guy by surprise, and just to see whether or not they'd be willing to talk to me. And I was quite surprised that never once did anyone say, no, I don't want to talk to you. They were willing to talk. And that's when you want to get at them. And they want some kind of stimulus. They're locked up 23 hours a day. And so I go in and do the interview, but they're all set to pull the wool over my eyes. They're ready to test me. And what they didn't know was I studied them inside and out before I went in. I looked at the crime scene photographs. I looked at the autopsy photographs and read the autopsy protocol. I knew everything about them. So when I went in there, armed with this information, I'll sit there a while and let a guy like Charles Manson try to manipulate me, or Richard Speck. But my goal was really to get back to Quantico and really to try to develop an investigative tool, something that was not available at that time. Criminal profiling is a process of analyzing a case by looking at the preliminary police reports, by looking at the profile of the victim, and you ask yourself the question, why was this victim the victim of this violent crime? I have to try to feel and experience what happened to the victim, and trying to put together a composite of the most probable type of an offender that is responsible for this crime. What you're trying to do is to cut down investigative man-hours, because when you conduct an investigation, you come up with thousands of potential suspects. It's always amazing to me. So what you want to do is to weed out, yeah, these people are bad, but put them on the back burner. This is the kind of character that we're looking for right now. So let's focus in and refocus our investigation on this type of personality. I've been involved in over 5,000 different investigations. I've interviewed hundreds of offenders. So that's what you're relying on at the end, is you're going back into your mind, thinking of similar cases that you've done and the interviews that you've done and what you've learned from those interviews. And hopefully those common patterns, those common denominators, now you can use and apply to the case that's before you. I have to try to experience and feel what was going through the mind of the killer in the case of a homicide.
You're able to assume the emotional point of view of other people, even those that might scare or sicken you. It's a troubling gift, I should think.
That's what causes some additional problems for me emotionally, is I go to bed thinking of a case. Who's responsible? I try to think of the victim and try to, in my mind, think of how the case went down. But at the end of the day, I may be able to walk out of the shoes and walk away from the killer, but I have a very difficult time of completely severing myself and my relations that I've had with that victim. And that's what causes me probably the most stress and strain and the nightmares. But I think on the positive side, that's what made me successful in my work. The making of a serial killer is a major debate, whether it's nature or nurture. And in my research, I just don't believe that someone is born to be a serial killer. And one of the things that I found with the serial killers and serial rapists is that there's an early childhood experience, and they've had childhood traumas. And certainly with Hannibal, he experienced it, he witnessed it. It was his younger sister who he saw that was cannibalized by these low-life deserters during World War II, and killed his parents and took away his worldly possessions, but they weren't able to take away his intellect and his aristocratic training. There are some very good redeeming qualities about him. It's just he had this urge to kill. And he never would have been a cannibal had it not been from his early childhood experiences, I believe. Yeah, the media portrays serial killers, and they throw them all in one big pile, and there are different serial killers. We have the Ted Bundy type of serial killer who went after basically college co-eds, very, very articulate, very, very up close and personal, would spend hours with his victims. In fact, he was even into necrophilia. He'd go back to the scenes and have sex with his victims after death. We have David Berkowitz, the son of Sam killer, who would go into lovers' lanes and with his .44 caliber revolver, and he'd fire away and shoot and kill the victims. But there was distance between them. There wasn't any type of sexual assault. With Hannibal, what we have is a sadistic serial killer. They're the worst of the worst. Hannibal is this antisocial personality. He's a chameleon. He can blend into his environment and be whatever he wants to be or has to be. So he's a master manipulator. If I would have done an interview with Hannibal, I would not have wanted him in shackles. And I would take him out of his cell and put him in a regular interview room with low lighting. About 3 hours into the interview, if you're interviewing a guy like I'm interviewing, or if it's an interview with Hannibal, what you want to trigger is the fantasy. It's like a CD in their brain. It's that fantasy that drives them going. Because they're on the hunt, always on the hunt looking for victims, but they fall back on the fantasy, reliving every fine detail of it. So that's why you can lock up the physical body in a cell like this, but you can never take away what's in that brain. But the problem is, the fantasy will never be fulfilled. If he cannibalizes people, it's not the end. It never satisfies the fantasy. So you can, if this guy escapes or if he's incarcerated, you're not going to rehabilitate this person. You're not going to change his way of thinking.
We live in a primitive time, don't we, Will? Neither savage nor wise. Half measures are the curse of it. Any rational society would either kill me or put me to some use.